I'm Cindy Novak, Downsize Administrator with the Carolyn Stark Real Estate Team. Thank you so much for joining us for our Home Edition event. Today we've got a great program for you. We've got Michelle Graf from Care Patrol, and she's going to be talking about the wide variety of housing options that are available for seniors today. Certainly not like when my grandmother was in the nursing home. So, take it away, Michelle.
Thanks so much, Cindy. Thanks for inviting me to be part of this program. So today I'm going to talk with you about Your Choice, Your Tomorrow, Senior Living 101. My name is Michelle Graf, and I'm the owner of Care Patrol of the Fox Cities. And what we do at Care Patrol is we actually help families to navigate that daunting task of finding safe and appropriate long-term care options. We love what we do, and what we really find exciting is there are so many options available to seniors today. A wide variety of independent living through assisted living, whatever a person's individual needs are. So my story starts about 8 years ago when I was a caregiver to my aging parents. And through that process, I learned a lot about home care, about private duty versus hired agency home care versus assisted living and senior living. And I found it overwhelming. There were so many complicated issues to have to deal with. But I found it also rewarding. I enjoyed what I was doing, and it seemed very interesting to me. So fast forward a couple of years, and I discovered a company called Care Patrol. And Care Patrol specializes in really helping families dig in to understand the costs, the options, the variability, the differences, all related to senior care and living options. And so I'm going to share my information with you today to the best of my ability, and really give you a sneak peek at what's out there and open up your mind to all the possibilities. So here's what I can tell you. Look at this slide. There are 3 different pictures here. You have senior living on one side, the next sign says senior living, and the third sign says senior living. Well, what does that mean to you? Just take a moment to think about what senior living actually means. I never had a good definition, but I do now. So here's what I can tell you about these 3 senior livings. One of them is a truly independent apartment building where seniors live. You have to be at least 62 years old to live there. There's no services offered. It's simply an apartment building for seniors. Okay? One of them is a mid to late stage dementia care unit with secure entry and exits. And the third one is actually an apartment building that offers limited services. So you can live there independently and maybe get some meals and some housekeeping help, or if you needed physical and care assistance, you could add that at a later date. So the word senior living doesn't mean anything particular. You have to dig a little deeper, and I'm going to do that with you today so that you'll have that information and that background when the time comes and you need information on that subject. My company, Care Patrol, was built on getting this right. So my expertise will be to help you. So years ago, this is my grandma's senior living journey. Years ago, the options were you're at home or you're at a nursing home, right? So my grandma actually had dementia, and she was living by herself. Her husband had passed away. My grandpa had passed away. She was living at home alone. She got dementia, and her next step was to go to a skilled nursing facility, and she lived there for many years for the rest of her life. Today, that would never happen. It wasn't until about the mid-1980s that assisted living started to become a phenomenon. It started on the coast and started to work its way toward the center part of the country. And the earliest version was, if you're familiar with the Heritage on the south side of Appleton, that was built in 1985. That was really the first assisted living available here in the Valley. St. Paul's followed in the early 1990s. And since then, the industry has exploded. And there are more than 70 different assisted living, continuum of care, senior living options available across the Fox Cities. So today's senior living options maybe look a little bit more like this, right? You're at home, which is an option. You're moving to a residential care apartment complex. You can see the little cruise ship that I have parked behind the building at the top. Sometimes we jokingly call these continuum of care retirement communities cruise ships on land because they have so many of the amenities, right? They have swimming pools, they have shuffleboard, they have putting greens, live entertainment. So that's kind of it's a little bit of a ha-ha, but not really a cruise ship, but a lot of those nice amenities. And then you have a small adult family homes that if you were driving right past one through your community, you might not even know that it was an adult family home. They're set up for smaller groups of people. Then you have community-based residential facilities, and you have nursing homes, and any other configuration of different senior housing and independent living options. So it's a little bit overwhelming, and we'll kind of dig into what those options are. So at a minimum, when we see senior or retirement living, at a minimum, what does that mean? Well, it means there are minimum age restrictions. Some of them are 55 plus, and some are 62 plus. That's kind of the basic. At a minimum, senior and retirement living usually is maintenance free. There's no lawn care, snow removal, repairs. You don't have to put on a new roof or buy appliances. That's all part of the package. Also, the senior livings tend to be accessible, right? So you're not going to have to climb stairs. You could climb stairs, but there's always going to be an elevator option. And then typically, it's going to be a walk-in shower with a built-in bench. And if there's not a built-in, obviously you could just add that. There's also usually, about 98% of the time, a community gathering space. So some place where you can get together with your neighbors and your friends, have coffee, play some games. Some places actually organize events for individuals, whereas others, it's really just the residents themselves coordinating gatherings and fun events. And there's also usually in senior living some kind of an emergency call system built in, or an I'm okay program where maybe residents just keep an eye on each other or hang a card outside their door every morning to say, I'm okay, something like that. So why would somebody leave their home and move to senior living, whether it's independent or assisted or perhaps a nursing home? Well, the biggest, one of the big things is a change in health conditions. So if the person's, maybe they've developed a health condition that makes taking care of their home a little bit more difficult, or maybe they have a cognitive impairment where being at home is confusing and overwhelming. So sometimes health is a major factor, but there's other things as well, change in finances. I mean, running a house is not cheap. You've got taxes and insurance and maintenance and upkeep, not to mention if you haven't finished paying off the mortgage, there's a lot of costs associated with running a house. And so a lot of people might choose to just say, you know what, it's just not worth it. I'm going to move to a really beautiful assisted living or independent living apartment and save myself some money. Some people move because their house just becomes overwhelming. It's too big for them. They've got a big yard, they want something smaller. It's just too much house. Some move for social reasons. We live here in Wisconsin. We have very long winters. And with the situation with COVID currently, there's just a lot of isolation going on. So some people will choose to move to a senior living apartment or a continuum of care because of social reasons. At least they'll have neighbors they can visit with. At least they can have a meal with somebody. Being at home alone is not healthy if you don't have those social opportunities. And some people just move for a lifestyle choice for any one of those reasons we talked about, or maybe they just decide to lighten their load and make a change. Start doing that downsizing now rather than waiting. So a lot of different reasons that people move. Those are things that you want to be thinking about. If you're thinking about downsizing, if you're thinking about making a change, think about some of those factors. Here's a little ha-ha, an example of how your home actually changes over time. So the next slide, senior living options include. Obviously, some people choose to stay in their own home that they've lived in their whole life, and that's always a possibility. I'm not really addressing that in this conversation today as we go forward. It's going to be really just talking about the subsequent options. So there are senior independent living communities, so places where seniors go, receive no services, totally independent. And we're going to dig into the different types because there's actually different types of independent living communities, believe it or not. There are assisted living communities. There's a range of those. There are residential care apartment complexes. There are community-based residential facilities. and there are adult family homes. Those are all considered different types of assisted living. And again, we'll come back and just talk about each of those more in depth. And then there are skilled nursing. So if somebody needs medical care, a skilled nursing facility is really the option. And we'll talk more about that, like when is a nursing home appropriate for people. And then there are continuum of care retirement communities, which combine usually, I like to say at least 3 of these different levels. So it might be independent, 1 level of assisted living in a nursing home, or it might be independent and 2 levels of assisted living. There's different configurations that you can find in the continuum care retirement communities, and those communities also tend to be the most expensive and also offer the most amenities. So, digging into independent living options. So, independent living, you might move in with your kids. There's in-law suites. There's additions that can be put on your house. There's a local company here in the area that does, they call it LinkedIn, where they put an extension on your house, sort of attach a temporary housing extension. There are different types of apartment buildings. So there are market rate senior living apartment buildings. There are income restricted Section 42 apartment buildings. And there are subsidized or Section 8 apartment buildings. And so there's different criteria as to which you might be interested or might be the best fit for you. So let's look at each of those. So when we talk about market rate independent living, of course there's the age restrictions. Some are 55 plus, some are 62 plus. And then they offer the most senior amenities. So the cool thing about the market rate is that they tend to have the heated underground parking. They have emergency call buttons or some kind of assistance that way. They'll tend to have scheduled activities. They might have bus transportation or at least be on a bus route or coordinate activities. They tend to have the most amenities in that sense. If they're within a continuum of care retirement community, that's when they might have housekeeping to offer, or also they might have transportation available, and then even a meal. So some of them, even though it's independent living, you might be able to get a meal included. But that's typically when they're a part of a retirement community, a continuum of care. There's also two types of senior living that are income restricted. So there's Section 42, which limits, you can only make, I don't know the exact number because it changes every year. It's different by counties, and it even can be different by building. So I'll just give you a number roughly. For an individual, it's probably around $35,000 to $40,000 of annual income to even be eligible to receive the discounted rate. And typically a Section 42 apartment will be a discount of perhaps $50, maybe $100 off the normal market rate rent. And the way that's paid for is that the builder of the Section 42 apartment would have received tax benefits in order to offer a discount to certain families with income limitations. Now, Section 8 is a little different. Section 8 is a HUD program that subsidizes rent for people with very low income. So that maxes out probably around $30,000 of annual income to be eligible for that. And just something to be aware of, when they calculate your income, they'll take your gross income minus your recurring medical expenses to calculate your eligibility. Now, if you have money sitting in the bank, they'll take 3% of that and say that's also part of your income. I don't know if it's exactly 3%. Again, that changes year to year depending on interest rates and inflation rates. So, but 3% is a good number to use. So if you make $20,000 in Social Security income and you have $100,000 in the bank, then you would probably look like you make $23,000 and you would be eligible for Section 8 subsidized housing. The way that works is people who are eligible at that low income level only have to pay 30% of their income. So if they're only bringing in $1,000 a month, their rent is $300. So it's a pretty nice deal, okay? If you are curious if you'd be eligible for that, I would just encourage you to apply somewhere, and then they would be able to give you the exact numbers to determine your eligibility. Now, assisted living or living with some assistance. So people say, oh, I don't need that, I'm not ready for that, and I get that. We're not ready for that. But it's good to have the information. It's good to be aware so that you know what your options are if and when you need it. And here's the reality, people. Our health changes over time. If if you have the honor of reaching the age of 65, over half of those people will at some point need some help with an activity of daily living. So an activity of daily living is a broad range of things like maybe somebody gets help with a shower, or maybe they have a cognitive impairment and they need supervision. Maybe somebody needs help transferring. They have a hard time getting up from a chair or getting out of bed. Maybe assistance with grooming. Maybe help with eating at some point if they have some sort of physical impairment that limits their ability to feed themselves. So it's a range of different things in activity of daily living, but just to be aware that half of people who reach the age of 65 will need some help throughout their lives with an activity of daily living. And then for women, it's actually higher. For women, it's almost 60% will need some kind of help, because women do tend to live longer. And as we age, our risk of limitations of a disability continue to increase. Health can change over time, and of course there's lots of options to help people when that time comes. In Wisconsin, there's 3 different types of licenses for assisted livings, as an example. So there are residential care apartment complexes, the community-based residential facilities, and the adult family homes that we talked about. But within those licenses, there's a range of different types of assisted living. So just because there is a community-based residential facility doesn't mean they're all the same. They specialize in different things. Some might be the cruise ship on land, and some might look like just a house next door. So very different feels, very different specialties, even within the license structure. All assisted livings, however, as a consistent, just to understand the base, they're all going to offer meals, they're all going to offer support, they're all going to offer room, board, and then at some level of care. Okay, so let's talk about the residential care apartment complex first. So this is one where it's probably the most interesting to some people, especially independent people, because residential care apartment complexes, and most of them here in the Fox Valley are set up this way, you can move in completely independently. You're receiving no care and no support. You can have access to meals if you'd like to have 1 meal a day. You can have access to housekeeping if you want to have that. You can have, maybe you decide that you don't want to drive anymore. You can have access to transportation. But down the road, if you need some limited amount of care, you're able to add those services over time. So without moving, without changing your apartment, you can actually add services to get you the care that you need right there in that residential care apartment complex. So it's kind of nice. Now there are some limitations to it. It's not perfect, but it is kind of a nice option for people who are thinking that maybe down the road they might need more help. These residential care apartment complex apartments are amazing. Sometimes some of them are studios. You can get a 1-bedroom, you can get 2 bedrooms. There's a full kitchen or a kitchenette at a minimum, 1 to 2 bathrooms, depending on how big the unit is. There are sleeping and living room areas. The buildings tend to be locked, right? So when you come in the front entrance, it's locked, maybe not all the time, but at least at night. So there's some security there. There's garbage services, parking services, really nice independent style living. But again, you can add services, medication management or help with showers or more meals or whatever a person's assistance might be down the road. That can be added later. Now, a community-based residential facility is a little different. These units vary by community, but generally, more often, a community-based residential facility is going to be just more of a studio apartment, a room, a private room, and with a private bathroom. And there are a few you can find around the valley with 1 to 2 bedroom options, but it's not really that common. But they are available, and we can help you find them. The services that are offered really are kind of like a full service package in a CBRF. They're going to take care of housekeeping. They're going to take care of meals and snacks and any kind of help that you need with personal cares. If a person would need help with medications, that's included. They really are there. A CBRF is really there to provide a full 24-hour service of care. There are plenty of caregivers to meet the needs of residents, and it's intended to be like a quick response. So in a CBRF, if somebody pushes a call button, a caregiver should be there quite quickly to be able to assist, okay? Now, CBRFs tend to specialize. Now, we have general CBRFs that kind of meet the needs of whatever the residents are, but we also have a lot of CBRFs that specialize in memory care. So meaning people who live there have dementia or Alzheimer's. And so their caregivers are trained specifically to work with that population to really make them, to support them as best possible. Some CBRFs completely specialize in frail elderly. So, perhaps they're not so much on the memory care side, but really being able to help people who have physical challenges. In this area, we don't really have any other specific specializations for CBRF, although there are some in the area for like drug and alcohol, or and then disability, when people are born with disability. So for younger people, there are some that are specifically set aside for that. So it's a little bit of a variation, a little bit hard to find, but we can always kind of narrow things down for an individual's needs. Now, when we look at adult family homes, these are actually, you wouldn't even recognize most of them. You'd be driving down the street in your neighborhood and you could drive right past an adult family home and not even realize that it's an adult family home, because they look from the outside just like any other home. The only exception is they tend to be accessible. So you could take a wheelchair right up the driveway and right into the house without facing stairs or any challenges like that. A residential home, also called an adult family home in Wisconsin, serves 4 adults who are not related to the caregiver. So many of these are run by shift. So there's a different caregiver who comes in every 8 hours and cares for the 4 residents. So it's a very intimate, people really get to know each other, very family-oriented, quiet, calm environment. And they're able to offer quite a high level of care. All right, so now let's talk about nursing homes, skilled nursing facilities. So a lot of people, think about kind of the old school, the long hallways, but so many of the nursing homes now have really kind of made their environment much more home-like. And the reason we have nursing homes is because they are a skilled medical facility. They're critical to our structure, our healthcare structure. So there's actually 2 types of care that are provided within the nursing homes. In other places, these tend to be separate buildings, but actually here in the Fox Valley, these services are offered under the same roof. So some people go to nursing homes and skilled facilities for short-term rehabilitation and recovery. So sometimes you may know somebody who perhaps fell or broke a hip, or maybe they had a heart surgery and they can't go home because they're just not strong enough. So they might go to a nursing home to do a rehabilitation where they get exercise, work with professional therapists, physical, occupational, and speech therapists to kind of get back to where they need to be so that they're able to return home. There's also another type of care within nursing homes. It's long-term custodial care. And so for some people, a nursing home is really the best care option for them. So say, for example, somebody who had a lot of medical issues going on. Maybe they had diabetes, and maybe they had a cognitive impairment, and perhaps they might even need some wound care. These are really getting to the point where somebody needs a skilled level of care. It's medically complex and very difficult. We certainly, if we meet somebody who has any kind of like a feeding tube going into them, or if they need IV therapy on a regular basis, they certainly need the care of a skilled nursing facility, and we would always recommend them in that direction. So that's kind of the role that nursing homes play today. They're not really a light level of care anymore. They really need to provide that next level. And in-home care services. So this is kind of the last type of care that we'll talk about, and then we'll go into costs a little bit. But in-home care services are care that's brought into your home. And perhaps you've seen medical home care. So sometimes people don't always go to a nursing home for rehab. Sometimes people return to their home and get physical therapy there, or perhaps a visiting nurse comes from a service to check in on them. And that's always just a short-term thing that's paid for by insurance. But there's other types of home care, non-medical home care, that people subscribe to in order to have help with activities of daily living in their home. So in my parents' case, we initially started with just somebody coming into the home to kind of help with tasks around the house, help keep up the house, help with managing medications, help with just making sure everybody was safe and that something wasn't going on that was dangerous. Some home care can also evolve to doing showers, assisting with dressing, and really taking on those ADL, those activity of daily living tasks. It can be very affordable on a limited basis, but in-home care does cost about anywhere, it depends, somewhere between $23 and $26 an hour. So again, very affordable compared to some other living options. However, it's only to a point. And we'll kind of look at some of those numbers and talk about the differences, okay? So just to give you a feel, here's a slide that compares the different types of senior housing, roughly, and then the different care costs. Okay, so under independent, the Section 8 housing is going to be the most affordable for truly independent living, with 30% of your income net of medical expenses. So very affordable, but you have to be income eligible. Section 42 will be slightly more affordable than the market rate, with that discount coming through that tax incentive through the builder. Again, there's an income limit on eligibility for Section 42. And then market rate apartments, what we're seeing for senior living ranging maybe somewhere from $750, and don't fall off your chair, up to $4,300 a month. At that top end, what you're going to find are continuing care retirement communities, independent living that actually includes a meal, transportation, entertainment, and housekeeping. So it's independent, but with a little extra thrown in there. Now on the assisted living side, you have the residential care apartment complex, which is always going to be the most affordable generally, depending on the type of unit you have and if you add care services. So when you move into a residential care apartment complex with a minimal amount of care, it's going to be affordable, right? Because you're not paying for you're not paying for high level of care here. You're paying for a larger space, and which is more affordable than a high level of care. When you step up to community-based residential facility and adult family home, the base prices immediately go up because you have a different care ratio. In the case of an adult family home, you have one caregiver for 4 residents. In the case of a community-based residential facility, you're going to probably see care ratios in the range of, in a memory care, 1 caregiver for maybe 4 to 7 residents at the most. In a more general CBRF, you might see as many as 1 caregiver for up to 12 residents. In a residential care apartment complex, you won't see that kind of ratio. You'll see 1 caregiver for maybe 15 at best to 20 residents, because it's not as much of a care model. It's more of an independent living model with some support services. So that's why the price will escalate as you go through that. It's all based on the number of caregivers. And then when you get into skilled nursing, you're paying for medical. That's a medical model. So in the skilled nursing, you have physical therapists on site. You have registered nurses almost 24 hours a day. You know, truly you have that higher skilled level. And so you pay for that. In a private room, $9,000 to $12,000 is a pretty typical cost range right now. And then for a shared skilled nursing room, it's not much less, you know, kind of maybe $85,000 to $10,500 in that ballpark. These change over time, but those should give you kind of a little bit of a flavor of the different costs. You know, the decision to move shouldn't be based on the price necessarily. Maybe in independent living that's the case, but when it comes to assisted, you've got to make the decision based on care needs first, and not on, you know, which place is the cheapest. And there's a lot of things to consider and a lot of questions that can be asked, and we can always help you more with that if you have more questions around that. But just to be aware that there are differences, okay? So one of the worksheets, and I can make arrangements with Cindy to email you this if you want to go through this. It's a cost comparison. And we just have people take a look at this sometimes when they're making a financial decision, like should I stay in my home and do home care, or is it time for me to move to a senior living, assisted living environment? And so it just kind of gets you thinking about, you know, do I still have a mortgage that I'm paying? Do I have any condo or association dues that I have to pay? Am I paying insurance? What are my utilities? How much does that cost me? Am I my taxes, some places I can't believe the taxes people are paying. What are my annual taxes on that property? And once you kind of start adding that up, it's pretty interesting. I know some of these assisted living or even the senior living seem so expensive, but compared to renting a house, not so bad. So, it's an exercise to go through. It gets you thinking about how much you're spending each month. So it'd be worth, taking a look at as you consider your options going forward. And last but not least, I was just going to show you a little quick slide. This is my team and I. We're all senior care advisors. I'm a certified senior advisor. We help families to navigate, to find safe and appropriate care options every day. We know all the communities. We've been in all of them multiple times. And so if you ever do, even if you have a question about a place or you're confused by some of the terminology that I shared, I know we're not going to be able to do a Q&A session here, but feel free to give us a ring at that 428-0827 number, and we'll be happy to just consult with you and see if we can help you in any way. Our services we don't charge for our services. We have agreements with all the providers in the area, so they actually pay us fees. So it doesn't cost you anything to give us a call. So thank you. I appreciate your time today, and enjoy the rest of your week.
Thank you, Michelle, for that wonderful presentation, and thanks to all of you at home for joining us today.